At noon in the country market, under the shade of a sprawling oak tree, stood an old woman selling tomatoes and peppers. She had once been a sprightly figure, but now her steps were slow and her eyes often wandered without focus. A young girl approached with a large woven basket hanging from one shoulder, too heavy for her small frame. The girl's name was Lillian, and she was selling wildflowers she'd gathered in the hills. The old woman looked up as Lillian set down her basket next to hers. "You here to sell flowers?" she asked kindly, wiping a sweat-streaked brow with the back of her hand. Lillian nodded shyly, setting about arranging her colorful blooms. The market was bustling around them, yet these two women seemed isolated in their shared quietude. Customers came and went from both stalls, but Lillian's basket remained full while the old woman's pile of vegetables grew smaller. As noon turned to early afternoon, a steady rain began to fall, light at first but soon soaking through cloaks and canopies. Shoppers hurried past them, seeking shelter elsewhere. The two women stood alone under their dripping oak tree. Lillian, despite her youth, felt no urge to move. She simply watched the old woman's hands as they continued to arrange vegetables into neat piles. "Tell me," said the old woman suddenly, "why do you sell flowers in a rainstorm?" Lillian smiled, wiping raindrops from her lashes. "Because some need beauty even when it's wet and gray." The old woman nodded, accepting this answer without question or commentary. She reached into her basket and pulled out a single tomato, passing it to Lillian. "What's this for?" Lillian asked, confused but not rejecting the offer outright. "For you," she said simply. "Take it. Sell it." Lillian hesitated, then took the red fruit from her wrinkled hand. She felt its coolness in hers, the slight give of flesh when she squeezed gently. With a shrug, Lillian set the tomato beside her wildflowers and resumed arranging them. The rain continued for some time, though neither woman seemed bothered by it. They stayed under their tree, talking little but existing comfortably in each other's company. As the clouds began to break apart, Lillian found herself with more customers than she'd had all morning. People who paused at her stall bought not only flowers, but also vegetables from both women's baskets. As the sky cleared and sunlight slanted through gaps between buildings, a man approached their shared shelter. He looked around, spotting the tomato amidst the colorful blooms. "I'll take this," he said to Lillian, pointing to it knowingly. Lillian handed him the tomato with a smile, noticing how neatly it fit in among her flowers. The old woman watched this exchange without comment or visible emotion. When Lillian turned back towards her stall, the old woman was gone. No farewell, no lingering goodbye. Her goods had all been sold. There were only empty baskets now left behind on the damp ground. Lillian looked around at the bustling market returning to life in the warm sunlight after the brief shower. She reached into her basket and plucked a single purple flower nestled among its green leaves. With it held carefully between finger and thumb, she moved through the crowd back towards where the old woman had vanished from view, offering no hope of finding her again, but knowing exactly what to do next.
You're listening to the Empty Teahouse. A purple flower swayed gently where Lillian had stood, and then night fell between clay walls.
In the quiet alley between two clay walls, beneath the soft glow of a single lantern, sat an elderly woman and a young boy. The alley was a narrow passage that cut through the heart of the city but was seldom used, save by those who knew its purpose. Tonight, it served as a meeting ground where no one would look twice. The woman, once known for her quick tongue and sharp mind, now moved with deliberate slowness, her hands steady yet unsure in their movements. She wore simple clothes, worn from years of wear but clean and well-tended. Beside her sat the boy, his eyes wide with wonder at the world that stretched beyond the confines of the alley. "I've come to ask a favor," she said, her voice soft but firm, looking down into the boy's face. The boy nodded without speaking, waiting for her to continue. His presence here was an unspoken agreement, something between them that neither had needed to define. "Can you tell me what you see out there?" She pointed beyond their immediate world, toward the darkness where stars shone like tiny sparks above. He tilted his head slightly and thought for a moment before answering. "I see houses, trees, people walking," he said in a small voice. His eyes darted around, taking in everything she could not reach with her own gaze. She nodded, then reached out to place her hand gently on his shoulder. "What do you think they're doing?" The boy's brow furrowed as if considering the answer deeply. "Sleeping," he said finally, looking back up at her. "Or eating dinner, or talking." "That's a good mind of yours." Her fingers tightened slightly on his shoulder, then relaxed. "You see, I can't do that anymore. I used to be able to look out there and know all those things myself. But now..." She paused, taking a deep breath. The boy looked down at the stones under their feet, kicking one gently with his toe. After a moment, he reached into his pocket and pulled out something small and wrapped in cloth. He unwrapped it carefully to reveal an intricately carved wooden flute. "This is yours?" she asked, her voice curious but not prying. He nodded. "My brother gave it to me," he said simply, then looked up at her with eyes that held more than just wonder. She smiled slightly, a bittersweet curve of the lips. "Will you play for me?" His fingers moved deftly over the flute's surface, and soon soft notes filled the air. The music was light yet poignant, touching something deep within both of them without ever mentioning it by name. As he played, her hand returned to his shoulder, a comforting presence. When the last note faded away, there was a moment of silence that felt heavy with unspoken things. Then she leaned forward and kissed him lightly on top of his head before sitting back again. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible but unmistakable in its sincerity. He nodded without looking at her, tucking the flute safely back into his pocket. As if to mark an end or a new beginning, there was the soft sound of footsteps approaching from the other side of the alley. A figure appeared briefly before disappearing again around a corner, leaving behind only the slight echo of movement and the lantern's flicker against the clay walls. The woman glanced up at it, then back down to the boy beside her, her smile lingering despite everything that was left unsaid. "You should go home now," she said gently. He nodded once more, rising slowly from his seat on the ground. She watched him walk away into the dark, the lantern's glow catching the edges of his silhouette for just a moment before he vanished completely. Back in the quiet alley, all that remained was the faintest echo of the flute and the warmth left behind by their presence.
The flame of the lantern steadied as autumn leaves danced around the wooden bridge.
Late autumn had settled over the village as dusk drew near. The leaves were gone from the trees, and the last light of day was fading fast. At a wooden bridge spanning a shallow stream, two figures stood side by side in silence. The old woman selling tea from her small cart had stopped for the evening, while the salt merchant paused to drink his tea and rest his feet. "Thank you," he said softly as she handed him the steaming cup. She nodded without looking up at him, but accepted a coin with one hand, while passing back the empty tin canister in return. A few moments passed before either spoke again, but the air felt heavy between them, filled with unspoken words and hidden histories. "Have you heard?" she finally asked, her voice quiet but carrying authority in its tone. "No," he said slowly, his eyes following a leaf floating down towards him from overhead branches. "I've been traveling." She nodded, understanding written plainly on the creases of her face. "Word reached me yesterday. Your brother has returned after all these years." The merchant's shoulders stiffened at that, and he let out a breath before reaching to refill his empty cup with hot tea from the pot still sitting beside her cart. "How is he?" he asked after sipping. The woman shrugged, setting aside their dishes neatly as if this were just another day in life. He has come back, but not home yet. Has he seen anyone? Not that I know of, she replied carefully, though I imagine his house stands empty and waiting for him. Another long moment stretched out between them before the merchant shifted, clearing his throat as if to speak. Was there something you wanted from me? He asked directly, daring her with his eyes to challenge him. But instead of defiance, understanding filled hers when she met his gaze. Only to offer tea and a reminder, she answered gently. Perhaps it is time for us all to return home. He swallowed hard, looking away back towards the setting sun that bathed everything in soft orange hues. For long minutes neither spoke nor moved until finally he sighed heavily and dropped an extra coin into her palm. "Thank you," he whispered again, this time with more meaning behind it than before. She smiled faintly, tucking the money carefully into a hidden pocket of her apron before closing her card up for the night. As she began pushing it along the path towards home herself, their eyes met one last time. Without another word, each resumed their separate journeys under the fading light. The only sound left behind as they disappeared was the soft babbling of water over stones beneath the bridge.
Downstream, a leaf turned over in the current, its flip signaling winter's approach to an old farmhouse courtyard.
On a wooden bridge over a small stream, two figures sat side by side without speaking. One was an old man with deep-set eyes that seemed to hold many unspoken stories, and beside him, a young woman whose hands were busy unraveling a ball of yarn, her movements slow and deliberate. The water beneath the bridge flowed gently, whispering secrets in its own quiet language as it swept past tree roots and stones. The old man had stopped by this spot often over his years, seeking respite from the clamor of the world beyond. Today, he found a companion in the young woman who had come to mend her fishing net. She glanced at him occasionally, noting the crinkles around his eyes and the way his fingers moved when he drummed them softly on the wooden rail, as if composing an unheard melody. The rhythm was slow and steady, almost meditative. After a while, she laid down her tools and reached into her basket for a small bundle of herbs that gave off a faint scent of earth and rain. She offered one to him. He accepted it with a nod of thanks and placed the herb between his lips but did not chew. Instead, they both turned their attention back to the water. The young woman watched as fish darted below the surface, the ripples like tiny dances on the skin of the stream. She thought about her son, back at home sleeping in the warm afternoon sun, and how this place felt like a pause between heartbeats. When she finished mending her net, she tied off the last knot carefully and let it rest beside them on the bridge. The old man had started to hum quietly, his voice carrying barely above the sound of water lapping against stone. As if moved by an unseen hand, both reached for their shared thread of conversation at the same moment, the moment when words were unnecessary. The young woman put her hand over his and squeezed gently, a silent acknowledgement of companionship. He smiled then, a small crease forming in his forehead that spoke volumes without sound. The bridge creaked slightly with age but held strong under their weight. Above them, leaves whispered to one another in the breeze, and somewhere nearby, birds began their evening songs. She eventually rose from her spot on the ground, gathering her things together, net, yarn, and herbs, and paused for a moment at his side. He looked up at her, waiting. "Thank you," she said simply, nodding toward the bridge under them. "For everything." He returned her smile with another nod of understanding and watched as she walked away down the path that led from the bridge, her steps light but deliberate. The old man sat for a while longer on the wooden rail, the hum in his throat growing quieter until it faded into the surrounding sounds of nature. The water continued to speak its own language without pause, weaving through the stones and around them both like an endless, unspoken dialogue.
A single step left a print in fresh snow, echoing the silence by the river.
Winter's first snowfall had settled on the courtyard of an old farmhouse, transforming the single persimmon tree into a sculpture of white branches against a dark sky. Inside, by the warmth of a low stove, lived Mariko, who tended to her small garden but now focused on preserving vegetables for the cold months ahead. Her movements were deliberate and practiced, each jar filled with pickles or sauerkraut received as much care as if it contained gold. Late in the afternoon, when shadows stretched long across the floorboards, a knock at the door caught Mariko by surprise. She opened it to find Taro, a man she had known since childhood but not seen in years. He was returning from travels far and wide, bringing with him stories of distant lands and cultures. Taro stood awkwardly in the doorway, hat clutched tightly in his hands. "Mariko-san," he began quietly, "I have come to share some news." "Come in," Mariko said simply, stepping aside. The room was cozy despite its small size, warmed by the stove's glow and filled with the scent of preserved vegetables. Taro entered and set down a worn leather bag near the door. He looked around at familiar objects, old tools hung from nails on one wall, a bookshelf lined with volumes she had collected over years of reading in solitude. "I am settled back here now," he explained without elaboration. His eyes drifted to the persimmon tree visible through the window. "I see you've been busy," Taro remarked, nodding toward jars lining her shelves. Mariko nodded. There was a moment's pause between them before she spoke again. "Would you like something to eat?" Taro hesitated, then shook his head. "No thank you, not right now." Mariko busied herself arranging jars on the table instead of staring at him directly. After some time spent in silence, Taro seemed to gather himself and said, "I've met many people over my travels, seen so much." His voice carried a hint of wistfulness. "And what have you learned?" Mariko asked without looking up from her work. Taro's eyes wandered around the room again. "That perhaps we cling too tightly." Mariko paused in her task and looked at him thoughtfully but said nothing more. The conversation seemed to end there, a soft crackling sound of the fire breaking the silence that stretched between them like an unspoken bond. Eventually, Taro stood and moved towards the door where his bag lay. He stopped briefly before leaving. "Thank you for your hospitality," he murmured quietly. As he stepped out into the snowy courtyard, Mariko watched him go from her place by the stove. The soft thud of his footsteps on snow grew fainter until it was swallowed up entirely by nightfall. A gust of wind brushed against the window pane, and a small pile of leaves stirred slightly outside.
The night deepened around Taro's footprints. Silence and stillness held the secrets of the fading light. The empty tea house rests. Until tomorrow.